Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 123rd episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast, and a very happy 2022 to you all. I hope you had a good break and feel ready for the year ahead. So this month's theme is mind-body connection and how our physical health supports our mental health and how our mental health supports our physical health. So on today's episode, I'm going to be reviewing and talking about the book Wintering, The Power of Rest and Retreat in Difficult Times by Katherine May. I read this book over the Christmas period and loved it, so I wanted to share my thoughts with you. This book really resonated with me as our new year in the UK starts in the very worst time of year in my eyes. The joy and lights of Christmas have faded, the weather tends to be really unpleasant, the need to hibernate overwhelming, and the light still very limited. Plus, we are still in a global pandemic, which adds to the sense of insecurity. I think it's a real shame our New Year doesn't kick off on June 21st every year with the summer solstice party. And January is a tough time of year. I think it can really demotivate people and make them feel even worse, with the added pressure of things like New Year, New You, and endless, often horrific diet adverts. And the true meaning of the term Blue Monday, and if you want to know more about that, please check out my podcast episode about Blue Monday, but is that we all have mental health and that there are steps we can take all year round to protect it. There are, of course, major risk factors for mental ill health, such as poverty, trauma, loneliness, ongoing stress, physical ill health, which again has been talked about more with long COVID. And these, of course, are not confined to just 1 month, let alone one day, as the third Monday in January is dubbed Blue Monday. We can certainly debate seasonal variations in the knowledge that some people living with mental ill health may find the winter months harder. But we know that mental health problems impact upon people all year round, and many people struggle to ask for help or seek that help. And indeed, when our mental health is low, I think I speak for most people saying, getting that motivation, even pushing yourself out the door to go for a walk can be more challenging. And then when our physical health starts to bring us down, our mental health is also dragged down with us. And according to research think tank The King's Fund, the connection between physical and mental health is significant. Around 30% of all people with long-term physical health condition also have a mental health condition, most commonly depression or anxiety. Mental health problems can seriously exacerbate physical illness, affecting outcomes and the cost of treatment. So it's thought that the effect of poor mental health on physical illnesses is estimated to cost the NHS at least $8 billion a year. Medically unexplained physical symptoms often have a basis in poor mental health and are estimated to cost the NHS $3 billion each year. And people with severe mental illnesses also have significantly higher rates of physical illness with a dramatic effect on life expectancy. So this may resonate, this may not, and I'm not, I share these statistics to give a sense of robust research. And this is to say we don't always feel 100% mentally optimum, nor do we feel 100% physically optimum. But if we can try and think about what can support us, it will benefit this whole picture, this umbrella of health. And often when I feel lethargic and unmotivated and low, I turn to books. And I discovered the book Wintering after reading the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And that's another really great book around creative living, not making a living out of being creative, but just about how we can all bring creativity to our life, which of course in turn supports our mental well-being. So do check that book out as well. But following that, I went on Elizabeth Gilbert's Facebook page and to see that she has her own book club, and Wintering was one of the books she recommended. And I think it can be really refreshing when you can't go anywhere to get lost in a book and find useful lessons and absorb things in your own way. And another fantastic book is A Manual for Heartbreak by Kathy Retzenbrink. And I highly recommend that one too. But this book, Wintering, isn't simply just about winter as a season. It's about winter in your own life. Those tough, low, challenging moments where you feel lost, at odds, isolated, lonely, not in the best of health, and unable to connect. And what Katherine May does is she uses her own experience and interviews others, uses historical information, research papers, and nature to make sense of some of those feelings and sentiments. So I really hope you're enjoying the content and information within this podcast. And if you want to keep up to date, then why not join my bi-monthly newsletter? When you join my mailing list, you'll receive a free copy of my ebook, The Mentally Healthy Leading Manager. And the link is in the show notes, but just in case you need it, it's bit.ly/MHLMEBK21. Okay, so I don't want to spoil the book for you, but I am going to give a little overview about why I found this book to be like reading a lovely detailed notebook you may have found in an old drawer or a locker belonging to a dear friend. With these snippets of personal experiences of ill health, experience of caring responsibilities, grappling to make sense of it, along with the change in the seasons. The book was first published in early 2020, prior to the first lockdown, and I think it fits perfectly with what's been going on for so many of us over the last 20 months. So first of all, Katherine May talks about being clear that we all experience our own winters and they will look different for different people. And everyone will have their own version of winter and it's completely normal, natural. And of course, we will winter personally many times in our lives, just as we see the seasons change. I found it super positive the way she doesn't pathologize and go over the top about mental ill health, but see it as a continuum of the day-to-day experience. And there's a really lovely story in there about cold water swimming. So her own experience of cold water swimming, how it helps her, how it helped manage in her wintering season, how it helped her build connection, and also how it aided the recovery of someone with bipolar disorder. And the journey around that and how cold water swimming has really enlivened this individual. It's also not a book about fixing anyone or telling you what to do or saying, if you feel like this, you should do this. What's really good about it is that it gives an overview of different scenarios, different stories, what people do, what they did, and they're things that you can draw from it, things that you can leave within the book. And I think that's so lovely. I think books that really give you a chance to explore and to see things from a different perspective and really let that marinate on is so useful. So we think about it in our mind and we think, well, what could help my physical health and what could help my mental health? And also sharing her own story, which really helps to reduce that feeling of loneliness. So her experience of being a parent, her experience of her job, her experience of her local environment and her community. I think the use of nature that she has throughout the book to help us understand how we may like to or can choose to view something in a different way as well. So she has stories about honeybees, dormice, and hibernation and wolves. It provided fascinating perspectives that I wasn't aware of and really helped me think about things in a different way. Now, of course, I can't hibernate like a dormouse, for example, but the analogies and the science behind it, I think was really, really useful. And to think about, well, why do we push back this need around hibernation and just needing to be introverted and inward looking for we must keep going and producing things and being very, very efficient. There's a place for all of that because, of course, the honeybee story is absolutely that. But again, it puts it in context of the seasons of life, societal expectations. I think this book draws on research in a very accessible way to highlight how we can use darkness and potentially what we view as insomnia to our advantage, when to challenge and when to stand up to things, and when to stop pushing into resistance and how that could benefit us. And I think, again, often we can really push into resistance that has a knock-on negative impact on our mental health and can really result in detrimental physical health impacts as well. And there's a line that I think was so lovely in the book, which is, quote, open quotes, when everything is broken, everything is up for grabs. There's also a Chinese proverb, isn't there, that the man who has everything to lose. And this is almost the flip of that, which is when nothing's working out, well, you can only build yourself back up and go from there. I think the epilogue was the element that really resonated with me most. And not trying to give spoilers, but I think it's really important for me to share why I found it this way. She gives an overview and she doesn't use these exact words, but the sense of toxic positivity we see on social media and how that can feel too much. So she mentions things like, hang on in there, or the constant memes. And now she doesn't say get rid of social media, it's really awful, but that it has its place and how we absorb that and digest that and the messages that we hear. So she talks about, the fact that misery, it's really important that misery or unhappiness or periods of wintering must be woven into something super useful, happy, cheerful at the end. And it must be a lesson to be shared with everyone. And we have to recover quite quickly and cope and everything will be fine. And I thought that was a really powerful point, because acknowledging that life is more often than not tough, painful, challenging, difficult, and we get through it in our own way and recognize what's happening, that we will feel rubbish, and we need to acknowledge this and not see life as a linear, like, from birth to death, but cyclical as nature is and nature does. So we need to give ourselves a break and do what calls us, even if and when we don't know what that is. But we also need the support of people around us just to sit with us and be champions and supporters, and not necessarily try and solve everything, because often in winter not everything is solvable. I did read some reviews. I had a look at some reviews criticizing this book, and so not everyone found it as useful as I did, primarily around the author's privilege and the trips she talks about and that she was able to take, and that it was seen as self-indulgent. But I personally really disagree with this, as I think very much how it came across to me was that Katherine May is trying to provide a perspective and show that holidays aren't always perfect, and she doesn't necessarily holiday in beach locations, and she's not talking about the glitz and the glamour. She's kind of trying to explain that, again, it goes back to different perspectives, who she meets, what she learns. And I also understand that many people can't afford to take the holiday she has taken and experienced. But for me, the way she writes about it is to share the knowledge and not gloat about the luxuriousness or make you feel like you're missing out. But of course, that's my perspective on it. I also realise that she doesn't cover the full spectrum of mental ill health and culture. So she speaks to a lot of people from Scandinavian backgrounds. She is writing from her own perspective and the people she knows in her life. So it does feel very authentic. And of course, for me, talking about culture and mental health, there is that bit missing. I think, again, those of us who maybe didn't grow up in climates where there is winter in the way that it is here, or we've come to learning about winter later in our life, that isn't really mentioned. So people that have to embrace the season of winter. But in her podcast, she does speak to and interview people from numerous backgrounds and picks up on these various life experiences. So those are the two things in terms of the review side. So essentially, this book is beautiful. It's really beautifully written. The way in which she talks about landscapes, people, experiences, very vivid descriptions, because it starts in late August and finishes up in March, and kind of you feel like you're moving along with those seasons. But essentially that wintering is a normal part of life, the seasons, but also winter in our own life, that we're not alone, that everyone will have experienced some kind of winter, that nature can teach us so much. It's really important not to push into resistance and listen to what our body says for our mental health and well-being, to find ways to find peace and tranquility. Modern ways haven't always been the way. And life can be rubbish, challenging, difficult, and that's okay, because you can and will find your own way through this in your own time. So if you've read this book, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can message me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and I'd love to also hear your thoughts about the concepts of wintering and what this means to you. So I really hope you've enjoyed this first show for 2022. And if you did, why not write me a review on Apple or Spotify now, which is taking reviews. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And we'll see you in the next episode, where I'm going to be talking about how to have productive conversations about mental health and well-being in the workplace. Until then, take care. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.